With the international break going on, Nwaneri finally played his under-21 debut for England and ended up scoring in his first start. Now in this video we're going to talk about the evolution of Nwaneri's career at Arsenal and how Arsenal can get the best out of him to really enhance that superpower that he has. So let's get into it. Now I was watching the under-21s game of England and I just thought Nwaneri really stood out yet again. Not only has he just turned 18, starting at a level way higher than he has, he scored that customary goal we have been seeing from him this season where he cuts in that half channel, able to find that little bit of space outside the box and put it into that bottom left hand corner. We have all seen it multiple times, and I think it's quite clear that this is the talent that Nwaneri has, and this is his superpower in a way. Not only is his shooting, I think, from outside the box just evidently very good and much better than a lot of the Arsenal team, he is that final third action player, the player that you want further up the pitch as possible because he can make things happen. And that doesn't take away from the fact he is also a brilliant progressor of the ball. He can come deeper, work with the ball with his brilliant dribbling and hold people off to run through into that space. And I do think in the future maybe Arsenal will look to enhance this a little bit more, given we're not really sure who's going to take that ball, turn and run with it in the team right now. But I do think realistically in professional football, at least for now, given his age, you want to make things a lot simpler. So I do think keeping him around that final third, as he is so effective there more than a lot of our players, is probably the way Arsenal should go. Now I don't think the way that Nwaneri has been used for Arsenal this season has been bad. Of course we don't really want him to play on that right wing if we're talking normally. He is a central midfielder, he is an attacking midfielder, and realistically he would be that sort of backup for Odegaard, but unfortunately Saka's been injured. We've had a lot of injury issues in the forward line, which has seen him kind of have to be put on that right, which I don't think is the worst option in the world. Not only can he still get into their moments where he can cut inside and get them shots away, which he wants, and be in them sort of half spaces, he isn't the worst touchline player in the world. I think there's a lot of people that have kind of discredited him there, and I first, when he went there, was not really sure if that would work for him, but he has done decent in tight areas, still a pretty good dribbler, can take people on and go past them. But more importantly, I do like how dynamic he is. He isn't just a player that has willing to come inside, which we all know he does prefer. He is willing to go on that outside and really challenge players with his great pace and sort of smash balls into the box. Now obviously these crosses, I think especially when he goes on the outside of players and gets to that byline, haven't been amazing. He's sort of just been smashing it in and we don't really have a striker in there, so that's obviously another problem. But I don't think this is bad. He's learnt this a lot more than I thought he would in such a short time, and he is pretty decent in these ways, at least a lot better than some of our wingers who naturally you would expect to be a lot better at doing this, such as Martinelli, who should really be someone that gets to the touchline, puts good crosses in. I will say Martinelli's crossing is probably a little bit better though. But I do think when Saka comes back and the evolution of Arsenal, we really have to talk about this Nwaneri position. I think a lot of Arsenal fans, and mostly outside of Arsenal fans as a whole, have been kind of putting Nwaneri as a right winger now, as he can be the backup to Saka for the future. And obviously with people like Max Dowman coming through, Arsenal being linked with attacking midfielders every day. I mean, El Khanous was linked just a couple of hours ago when I'm making this video. I kind of do think that is that sort of resonance of he will be that right wing player and could potentially work off with Saka in that way. Now, as much as I like Nwaneri, and I definitely think even back in August I made a tweet saying that he will probably be that backup right winger, and I do think in the future I think that's something, if we don't buy a lot of wingers this summer, probably maybe buy one, I want to buy two, you could see him develop as that backup to Saka. But I do think that is something that Arsenal should not really try and promote, and I think we should try and keep him in that midfield. And this is the real problem I have with Nwaneri's usage at the moment. He needs to be in them half channels a lot more. I've said about how he is good on the outside right now because of injuries, but for the evolution and when we've got players coming back from injury more importantly, and we make more signings in the summer, he needs to be in them half spaces. He needs to be playing inside the pocket, being able to pick the ball up with maybe players around him being tight. We know how good he is in them tight areas. Not the strongest of all, and I do think sometimes he might need a little bit of help, but ultimately Odegaard isn't really either, so that's not really been a problem in the past. If we get him into these areas, these elevated positions, then he can create and he can shoot more importantly, which is yet again something Arsenal need to do more. Now I guess when you talk about this, it's how are we going to give him that space? Now I think while he's out on that right wing right now, I wouldn't care about it too much, but I do still think there is ways that Arsenal can go about doing this. I think there's a lot of ways this midfield needs to change and will change. I think Zubimendi will bring a little bit of that, and maybe if we sign another player, but I do also think think right now there can be changes made. I think overall Odegaard should not occupy that right half space as much. I know it's the area he loves the most. He's one of the best creators, I think, from that area, probably just for the amount of times he gets the ball there, to be honest. And I know with Saka and Ben White and even Timber recently, I think Odegaard has a good connection of being able to help the sort of incisive passes in them areas. However, personally, I think I'd rather have Nwaneri come inside permanently, even if he is quote unquote as a right winger on team sheet. I think sometimes when Arsenal need to stretch the team out, you can play him as that width and let him hold it to be on that island, and that makes complete sense to sort of pull the other team away. But I actually want, when Arsenal are building up against a lower mid block, maybe defensive team, he needs to come into that channel. Odegaard also, I think, needs to have a much freer role, but a freer role deeper. We spoke about it loads. I don't want to go on about it too much here because it's been gone over 400 times. In order for Odegaard to still be successful, I think he needs to allow Nwaneri to be that outlet and not be someone that is kind of facilitating for him. Let's just trust Nwaneri, give him that space in the area that he wants, and let Odegaard freely move around. I think Odegaard's usage needs to be more on that left hand side. I think Arsenal still look better when he's in more central areas, and even then you can have Nwaneri as that right winger who kind of comes in that right centre mid spot. You can have Odegaard as an out and out cam. You could argue, I don't really like him as an attacking midfielder, but I'd still think as an advanced 8 covering the entire pitch would be something very effective. Also, we know how good he is off the ball, and then let Rice, and more importantly, play off that. I think one of the key things I saw in the England game was that Rice was being that late runner into the box. We know how good he can be at doing them sort of runs, but not being that main person that we target. England used really well to kind of let Rice pick and fill the pieces in and the little spots that you might need an extra runner in there to break down that block, and that's when they scored their second goal, where he comes into that right half channel and makes that run and puts it across. We never see Rice make these runs for Arsenal. We see him make them primarily left-sided runs quite early, but we never see him make them secondary right-sided runs. And I do think in order for Arsenal to maybe get a little bit better against physical mid blocks and low blocks, because I still think we're struggling against low blocks this season, not as much last year, but I do think that has been a problem. I think Rice needs to be able to move into these areas. I think Rice should be able and willing to move into the right half space, where I think he is still more effective than on the left personally, but be that secondary player. He should be at the edge of the box waiting and then can make them runs. I get this is hard with the fact Partey is actually deeper than him and Zubimendi looks to come in the summer, and these two players are more sitters. They aren't going to make them runs into the box despite being the defensive midfielder, and they're sort of going to cover if anyone breaks on them. And I get that international football is very different to football in the Premier League, and the Premier League every team has a lot of threats, so you kind of do want someone there covering, and I understand that. But I don't know if Arsenal need to have this system where Rice sits to the back post for crosses. We spoke about that central progression, but if Rice comes more centrally into the right space and then Odegaard can switch with him, be central and go to the left as well, and Nwaneri can also be in them half spaces, I think it can still work. And we've seen how much Timber and Ben White do push up on that right hand side for Arsenal, so they could create that width if Arsenal really do pen a team in. Now with this system I wouldn't do this, and I would be quite wary of doing this against certain oppositions, but I think when you get a team deep into their own box, we have seen Arsenal struggle this season, like that West Ham game is a great example. That's where this stuff needs to happen. It kind of happens a little bit on the left with Calafiori making them incisive runs, and we've seen Miles get a lot more encouraging going forward, but I do think when we build up on that right hand side, we need to let Odegaard and Timber sort of facilitate for Nwaneri, so we can get Nwaneri in the areas that he wants, because he needs to get them great shots away, and he is one of the better ball strikers on our team, especially outside the box. He's probably the best in the club. So that is the evolution I kind of want to see now, but we've also got to speak about the evolution of the future of Nwaneri. Is he actually going to be that right centre mid player for us? We obviously got Max Dowman coming through, who, you know, even Declan Rice was speaking about the other day, is the best 15-year-old in the country, and obviously this guy's got a lot of talent. I expect him to play in the next few years. And there's also been links to people like Severo Nipan, who I don't know what's going on with that. I know he's a left-sided player, but he is still sort of advanced 8 attacking midfielder role. And obviously there's lots of other players being linked with Arsenal, and I expect us to probably commit to an attacking midfielder side, not this summer, but maybe that'll be the next summer thing, because I think there is more important things right now. And this is the thing with Nwaneri. I do think for Arsenal in that right centre mid spot, he can do that perfectly. I think even from deeper, we've spoken about it, but how good he is. I do think obviously his pressing is not at that level Odegaard's is, and it kind of depends who Arsenal bring in and what sort of out of possession system Arsenal evolve with to really see if Odegaard's worthy of staying in that team. team. But fundamentally, Arsenal do need more going forward, and I think we need more, maybe just excitement in them areas. We've seen how bad I think particularly Odegaard's been in attacking positions this year. His shooting has completely fallen apart. If you've seen that compilation on Twitter of every shot he's had this year, I would recommend watching it, and it is just a major concern. And it's not even just about the shooting. I think his creativity has been fine, but I think without Saka, you've really seen a lot of problems, I think, with some of his passes that he makes for the team, which I do think needs to be improved. And it's not all down to Odegaard, it never is. Like, there's a lot of other problems, I think, going forward, but I don't think he has really done enough to warrant keeping him long term in this team. And I get the mental side of the game is very important. He's a very good leader on the pitch, and I do find that very important. But there is a certain level of, if you aren't bringing that sort of ability and creativity to the team in attacking areas, and you're not really taking your chances, then how long can we really afford to keep him at the club? We can't keep messing up, especially when we've got an Nwaneri kid coming through and he is just so excited. And I do think there's certain levels of physicality I would want Ethan to improve on, but that makes sense given his age. And I also think that there is definitely areas to improve with him consistently, but he's got to be that long-term future in the right centre mid spot. I think another thing that is really important about these sort of areas is when Saka comes back, I think he needs that sort of space. I think Saka, it's definitely been a talking point, and depending on where you think about it, some people are going to say it's a big thing, some people are not going to think it's that big of a deal. But Odegaard and Saka have worked brilliantly together, but there's definitely questions about, is Odegaard in the way sometimes of Saka, and could he sort of improve his positioning to get out the way? Now, something that would improve this straight off the bat is just having Odegaard come over to the left, roam a little bit in that central areas and do these runs. I still think I would want Declan Rice to be that secondary runner deeper and later, more importantly, but this is good because it can get a lot of the pressure to that back post in certain areas, and it doesn't necessarily rely on us crossing the ball. I think when Rice sits back post and you've got Saka on the wing, maybe Timber and Odegaard, it's quite obvious Arsenal are going to cross the ball, which I don't think is the worst thing in the world. And I think even what I'm trying to say now may not help us in many ways, because we may be waiting for this later run and it may ultimately be a bit more obvious, and it kind of limits that crossing ability Arsenal have if we've just got like Mourinho in the box or Havertz in the box compared to a lot of defenders. But I still think Arsenal are at their best when they are doing these incisive passes through for deeper runners and getting people into the box in different ways. I don't think we should be an active team that just gets the ball down to the wings and then gets everyone back post and just crosses it in and tries to head it. I just think sometimes we are attacking with brute force rather than real ability, and sometimes that works because I think we have great players, really tall players, really physical, but we're seeing how big the physical level of the Premier League is getting. Specifically, we've seen what happens when teams defend us well, and I think we've more importantly seen what happens when Saka's not doing the crossing. This has been one of my biggest critiques this season. I think Nwaneri is another person in that team that is incredible crosser, which I think is why Arteta keeps him out wide a lot of the time, a lot more touchline based because of that ability. But it doesn't really make sense to play a crossing system when we aren't got many good crosses. We have Rice, we know how good Rice is at crossing from corners, we know how good Saka is, but Rice isn't the one making the crosses, he's the one in the box trying to head the ball. And when Saka's not in the team, I think it's a lot to rely on him constantly to just create these chances. When we've got someone like Nwaneri on the bench or wherever he is in the team, he is also that impact player in the final third, which we just do not have. And maybe this wouldn't be so bad if Arsenal buy a Nico Williams on the left or a Benjamin Šeško up front where he is dominant in these sort of positions, but I still think that is something Arsenal need to look at in the future. And I think there's a lot of evolutions I want to see with the club and the team going forward next year, and I think in that forward area most of them happen. I think defensively we are fine. Now let me know what you guys think. I think I've kind of gone over a few different things in this video, but Nwaneri, I think ultimately his future is in that right centre mid spot for the club, and I think Arsenal even right now as a winger needs to get him into the inside a lot more. And I think that's my overall point about the video, and trying to get him to sort of be that main man over Odegaard in the final third. But let me know what you guys think in the comments, and if you want to see my video about Nico Williams potentially joining Arsenal, watch that now where I go over how he would work. So thank you guys for watching. I'll see you in the next one.